So just to orient the audience a little bit here, could you give us a breakdown of how the perception of time has changed throughout the course of history, particularly in the last 500 years or so with the Industrial Revolution, or at least how you describe that change within the book?
Yeah, I think this really goes to the heart of a lot of it because it's really an attempt to get right down to the sort of most basic assumptions that we make about how our experience of time just has to be, right? It just feels like certain things feel like that they're so basic and given to how we must experience time that they can't ever have been different. And I'm trying to argue that they were different. It's a very speculative case, as I admit in the book. Getting inside the mind of a medieval peasant, as I sort of make an effort to do, is obviously not something that you can, do in a scientific, verifiable way. But there's a bunch of anthropological work done among cultures even now that are that have sort of less sort of industrialized sense of time, and there's all sorts of historical sources that lend credence to this. I think at the most basic level, the point is that we have this notion that there is ourselves as you, and then there's time, and it's somehow a thing that is separate from you. Nobody can quite put their finger on what it is, but it's something that you have a relationship with, and it's usually an adversarial relationship, right? You have to manage time, you have to conquer time, or you are constantly fighting against time, or something like that. And I think that at the most basic level, that idea that time is something separate from who we are is kind of what causes all the trouble here. It brings a lot of advantages as well. I don't think the Industrial Revolution or subsequent innovations could have happened without that way of thinking about time. But it puts you in this constant situation of trying to get a kind of control over time, kind of get a sort of upper hand over time that you won't ever achieve, because that's not the nature of that. We can't get out of time. We can't we can't control time in the way that we want to. It's not open to us. And I think that for all the many terrible things that would have afflicted the life of a early medieval peasant somewhere like the North Yorkshire countryside where I'm speaking to you from now, time problems would not have made any sense, and they wouldn't have existed. It wouldn't have been the case that you could have felt like you had too much to do in the time available, or that you had to sort of fight against time, or that if you used pockets of time in certain ways, you were wasting it. All of that comes from this move, primarily in the Industrial Revolution, to start seeing time as a resource, something that you've got to sort of maximize the value of, so that you can sort of buy other people's time. That's obviously crucial to the development of shift work and industrial labor. I think none of that would have made sense in those pre-industrial times. The rhythms of life would have just emerged from the tasks that needed doing. This is a form of life that anthropologists call task orientation. So, you milk the cows when it's time to milk the cows, and you harvest the crops when it's time to harvest the crops. You can't impose a schedule on that. You can't do batch processing of it like we're always told you're supposed to do with your emails and other things like that. You just have to do it when it needs doing. And as a result, I think people would have not experienced this separation between time and themselves. Time was just the medium that their lives unfolded in. Or if you want to get kind of philosophical about it, as I do in parts of the book, it's almost like saying that to be in this state of mind is almost like saying you are time. You are a stretch of time. It's not that you have a certain amount of time to do things with. It's that you exist as a relatively short stretch of time. And I think there is a deep peace of mind in that. Perhaps I call it deep time. Perhaps it's very closely related to flow states. A sense of undifferentiatedness between yourself and the moment that you're occupying, a greater capacity for sort of awe and wonder and fullness of the moment. And at the same time, they had more terrible life-ending diseases than anybody and lived in a shocking circumstances, and on no level do I think we should go back to being medieval peasants. But I think that how they would have experienced time specifically would have had certain advantages compared to what was to come.